brief thought about the stupendous cyber operation going on in Lebanon right now against Hezbollah that's causing so many of our enemies to suddenly explode because of devices that they're carrying. It's really an amazing thing. It's an amazing achievement, although not admitted, an amazing achievement, no doubt, for Am Yisrael, for the geniuses working tirelessly to defend us and protect us from our enemies throughout the whole system of security that we have in place here in Israel. And so we need to start by acknowledging the good and acknowledging how grateful we are to the people who have worked so hard and risked so much in order to keep the citizens of Medinat Yisrael safe from enemies who clearly are trying all the time to destroy us. But I think it's also a very interesting moment at which to contemplate the question of how we are supposed to simultaneously thank people for what they accomplish and thank Hashem for what they accomplish, for what he allows them to accomplish, for what he blesses them to accomplish. And we're more familiar with this reading Torah from actually recent chapters in the Torah in Sefer Dvarim. We've been reading the annual cycle that really come up in Parshat Ki Tavo again. But I'm thinking most specifically of an earlier pasuk, that when you get this great agricultural production from the land that Hashem has given you, there's this risk summarized by the pasuk, Ve'amarta bilvavecha kohi ve'otzem yadi asa li et ha'hayil hazeh. And you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand has gotten me this wealth. Hayil in this context is the wealth of agricultural produce, but it's obviously a word that also means might. It's associated with soldiering. And so certainly, at least if we think about related uses of words, is connected with the present moment, right? That there are a lot of people around the world who are going to look at what happened yesterday and today and marvel at the capability and the genius and the might of the state of Israel and of its citizens who work together to keep it safe and to strike at its enemies in ways that no one expects. And it really is marvelous. It's amazing. And it's really a long-standing tradition in Israel that goes back to some of the earliest daring intelligence operations carried out after the founding of the state, the abduction of Adolf Eichmann from South America back to Israel to stand trial for his crimes during World War II, Operation Wrath of God carried out against the various planners of the attack by our enemies against the Israeli Olympic athletes, in which many of them were murdered. That was, in some ways, there are many beginnings, but you could call it one kind of beginning of the terror war waged against the most vulnerable and innocent members of Israeli society by the most ardent and committed enemies of the state of Israel who wish to destroy it. That has been going on now for decades in various heinous forms. But that was an early and very notable instance where you had a terrible attack that was carried out, and then, at least as far as what is now known and publicly released or assumed, the Mossad tracked down all of these different planners who styled themselves as the champions of the newly minted Palestinian cause, and assassinated them. And this isn't exactly the same thing, but it has the same kind of element of meticulous planning and ingenious design and careful targeting, where you really identify exactly who has it coming. In this case, yesterday and today, all of these fighters for Hezbollah who have literally taken hold of devices as not just a badge, but a tool of membership in an organization that's sworn to mass murder the Jewish people, and you make them pay for it, right? So the present day version is a high-tech version of something that the State of Israel has been doing for a while. And no matter where you sit in the whole spectrum of different kinds of Jews and how they feel about Israel, it's very hard not to marvel at it and very hard not to appreciate it and to celebrate it, because it really represents some of the best of what Jews can come up with when they protect each other and devote their intellect and their sense of self-sacrifice to that effort of protection, and turn it into a kind of creative and intricate capability that the rest of the world never expects, and that extends our arm very far to strike at our enemies, particularly when we're trying to get revenge against them. And this is a point that we'll pick up further on. But before we get into, this question of revenge versus other things, I think with all of that being said, now we have to go to the, I don't know if you might call it the theological question. To what degree, when we do these things, should we be saying, good job that you did that, you're amazing, I admire you, meaning to the person who did this, or the people who did this together, the power that you have is remarkable, all of these things? Or should we be saying, thank you to Hashem, and it's all from Hashem? And of course, we must say the latter, and it is, of course, all from Hashem, but you have to really look closely at that statement, because it comes out very easily. Of course, everything is from Hashem. But when we really consider the implications of that, that does run against how we sometimes are tempted to relate to the events of the world. Because whether you're an ancient pagan or an ancient Israelite, or whether you're a person in the present day, when you're doing things successfully and accomplishing them, one can't help start to feel like, this is just me that's doing that. I'm powerful, I'm capable, I have talents, I have capabilities, I have means, and I see my goals being achieved through the expression of my will and my ability to reach out into the world and affect it. And I start to just kind of think about that and focus on that. And also observers tend to think about that, because they see that success and they say, well, this is a person with power, and I admire power, I celebrate that power, or I want a piece of it, or all of these things, these instincts people have. And that leads people very often to this kind of game, if they're not careful, where even when they want to include HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their picture of the world, they say, okay, sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu does things, right? Like the insurance company that calls something an act of God. If a meteorite falls out of the sky and obliterates a house, you say, okay, Hashem did that, because I certainly didn't, and it's not so easy to make it happen. Like, no one can do that. So we say the things that we can't control are Hashem. And then the things we can control, those are the things that we're doing. And when you make that division, there's obviously a serious theological problem with that, because it's not the case that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved only in some of what happens in the world. That would, in a sense, be a limitation on his power and on his might and on his supremacy over the world that he's created. And that quickly leads you to talk in terms of more than one power or more than one God. And so the unity of Hashem, combined with the account of the creation of the world that we get from Sefer Bereshit, it's clear that what the Torah is saying is, no, who is this personality that is described in the Torah? When we refer to Hashem by his names, we're talking about a personality where it's only fair to say that everything that happens is an expression of his will. Nothing else really will suffice. And anything else will immediately lead to a kind of cartoonish more pagan, more idolatrous notion of, a friendly giant with limited powers or limited knowledge who sometimes can help you and sometimes is uninvolved and is looking the other way, and it's up to you. And a whole bunch of things don't make sense about what the Torah teaches us if you start to think of it in those terms. So we're talking about Hashem running the show, which means it's all from him, which means that when we succeed, when, for example, the geniuses in Mossad or in the IDF cyber unit or whoever it is figure out how to make it so that thousands of Hezbollah fighters explode all at the same time, that's succeeding because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has blessed it to succeed, because he's allowed it to succeed. And then we have to struggle now with kind of the opposite problem of, you don't want to take credit away from people entirely, right? There's such a thing as credit being given to people for what they did. It doesn't make sense to say when someone does a really amazing good thing, whether it's making a bunch of Hezbollah fighters blow up or whether it's doing something in their community to help the needy or to build an institution that brings people together around mitzvot or whatever, doing mitzvot, whatever. It's like very definite, straightforward things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do. There's a way of doing it right and a way of being a good person and all of that. And then to just say about that person, like, no, you didn't really do that. That was Hashem that did that. Like when you start talking in those terms, if everything is from Hashem, then there's no room for the agency, for the merit of individuals and their choices, and for you to say, I admire that you have the talent to do that, and that you had the priority and the judgment to do the right thing with your talent, and all of these things that we can distinguish between when we're looking at people's actions and say, this person did right and well, and this person did not. And the one who did right and well does deserve to be praised and celebrated, even if it's the case that he couldn't have succeeded unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed him to or wanted him to. And, yes, he's created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so also is this person who failed. And when the person who failed, it's also because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted him to fail, right? This is the question that really first gets taken up in the Torah, although there's always a way of quibbling about the first, but probably with Cain and Hevel, right? Where one of them makes an offering that's accepted and one of them makes an offering that isn't. It's a deep thing about the human condition that the text is very aware of. And there are many longer discussions about this, and it has to do with also questions of, well, if everything is from Hashem, then does that mean the things that happen that seem bad to us are also from Hashem? All those theological ways of going with things. So we can't get into it all right now, but I think the basic point to make is that there is, on the one hand, a clear need and necessity to give voice, to acknowledge the quality and value of things that people accomplish and to give them credit for it. And at the same time, we also must always, if we are properly serving Hashem, acknowledge his authorship in all of that, right? And to show gratitude for the good that comes from the success of people who created, right? We can't locate HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the weather we don't control and say, okay, thanks for making it rain today, but stay out of the business of human affairs. When someone succeeds in, a cyber operation, I'll just talk about how great it is that people can do this. We need to do both. We're obligated in a sense to do both. And I think that you can see this, play out in various ways. The relevant one for this week's parasha in the annual cycle of Parashat Ki Tavo, we bring the first fruits of our agricultural crop and give it to the Kohanim. And there's this whole speech we have to recite that also is in the Haggadah for Pesach, where we are recounting the slavery in Egypt and the liberation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was responsible for, that, everything comes from Hashem setting us free to act and to be sovereign in the land and to create things, and that the success that we have is only from him, right? we have to make that acknowledgement. But we don't therefore say, none of this fruit belongs to me. I'm not going to eat any of it. We make a token acknowledgement of that. And then we can have some fruit and we can sell it and we can eat it and all those good things, right? And it's assumed that there will be plenty of, oh, this fruit is great. You grew really good apples. Good job. That comes very easily to us. But the thing we need to make sure to make room for is to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we have that in Parshat Ki Tavo. But I think also narratively, maybe one of the places, especially this is picked up, and we could also maybe look for how we understand it from the standpoint of Cain and Hevel. But when two vying brothers appear again, with the threat of violence between them, even we're over with Yaakov and Esau, the sons of Yitzchak, right? And there, I think, especially, it's really clearly laid out. Because what does Yitzchak do? He says to Esau, go and hunt some game that will then be prepared as I like to eat it, and bring it to me, and I will give you a blessing. And Esau is his name is like a word that means doing, right? He's about doing things in this world. La'asot, or asu, or asa, right? These are like different conjugations of this verb that means to do. And Esau just sounds like one of the conjugations of such a verb. He's all about doing. And Yitzchak says to him, go out and do something, bring it to me, I will benefit from it, and then I will, in a sense, I will praise that, and I will bless you. So there is this sense of, I'm going to acknowledge what you did. You're a person. I'm going to acknowledge what you're capable of, and I'm going to give you a blessing because of something you did. And then Yaakov obviously does this subterfuge, or whatever you want to call it. There are different things you could claim about how the story goes, but in any case, Yaakov gets some goats and prepares the meal sooner before Esau comes back, and he brings it to Yitzchak. And whether Yitzchak knows or doesn't know, we can maybe discuss in a second that he's talking to Yaakov. But the question is, how did you arrive so rapidly, right? Like, if you went out hunting, then how is it that you came back so quickly with food, right? So Yaakov says, it says, Vayomer Yaakov el Aviu, Anochi Esau bechorecha, asiti ka'asher dibarta elai, kum na shva ve'achla metzedi ba'avor tevarachani nafshecha. And Yaakov says to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done according to what you told me. Arise, and I beg and sit and eat of my venison or my game, that your soul may bless me. And then Yitzchak says to him, Vayomer Yitzchak el beno, ma ze miharta limtso beni, Vayomer ki hikra Adonai Elohecha lefanai. So Yitzchak says to his son, how is it that you found it so quickly, my son? And he said, and maybe you could read this different ways, but presumably it's talking in what does Yaakov say? And he said, because the Lord your God brought it to me, right? So at this point, Yitzchak's reaction is, Vayomer Yitzchak el Yaakov, Geshana ve'amoshcha bani ha'atha ze bani Esau imlo. So he says to him, come near me that I may feel you, whether really my son. And he does these different kind of tests. He smells him and he touches his hands, which have been covered with skins to make them seem more hairy, like the hands of Esau. And at the end of the day, what Yitzchak famously says is that the hands are the hands of Esau, but the voice is the voice of Yaakov, right? So it says, Vayigash Yaakov el Yitzchak avihu, Vayimoshe Vayomer hakol kol Yaakov v'hayadayim yedei Esau. Okay, so Jacob went to Isaac his father, and he felt him, and he said, the voice is Jacob's voice, and the hands are the hands of Esau. Now, I'm not, I think, remotely the first person to make this point, but one way of understanding what's happening here, because ultimately Yitzhak is going to give his blessing to Yaakov, is that Yitzhak is blessing what he wants to bless. And what he wants to bless is someone who has the hands of Esau, but has the voice of Yaakov. The hands of Esau are the hands that do things. That's what Esau is about. And Yaakov has to demonstrate he's a doer. And the sheepskins or goatskins that are on his hands aren't just a costume. They actually are the result of things he did, right? He had to go slaughter goats, skin the goats. And he, in a sense, had to provide in his own way, in this case, through herding instead of through hunting. And so he's showing that he can be a doer. But then with the voice, what is the voice saying? The voice is saying, oh, how did you come so fast? And he doesn't say, well, because herding is actually more convenient than hunting, Father. He doesn't make a material case for the superiority of his technique or his means. He says, because Hashem let me. And that voice of Yaakov is the thing that Yitzhak is also responding to. And perhaps maybe a reason that he is suspicious, right? I mean, you could argue, oh, he just recognizes the timbre of voice as being different, but that, in this case, would make it less interesting. And I think we have the opportunity instead to say, what's what the voice is saying. That Yitzhak knows that Esau would not say, oh, yeah, this is all because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all from Hashem. That if Esau came back from the hunt rapidly, he might come back and say, it's because I'm a good hunter. And, shouldn't you bless me even more because I'm an even better hunter than you expected? And that if that's the difference that Yitzhak is picking up on, then the point is he's saying, okay, I finally found the son that I can bless. I set up this test for Esau, and based on his behavior, maybe I would or wouldn't have gone through with it. Yaakov, if he had come in and he had said, I'm here for your blessing because I'm a tzaddik and I'm very faithful and I study a lot of Torah, but I don't have a meal for you because I was too busy studying Torah. But because I'm such a tzaddik, why don't you still give me your blessing? Maybe Yitzhak would have said, I'm sorry, but I was looking to bless someone who can actually get something done because we're going to become a nation. And if you can't get things done, then that nation cannot flourish, right? All the bracha that he ultimately gives is about, military might, agricultural production, things like that. So Yitzhak gives a blessing to the son that he realizes can do both things, can be a doer and also can talk about it in a way that goes back to acknowledging Hashem. And Yaakov really carries this through in his personality and his life. Elsewhere later, when he's talking about his success and all of his business and livestock breeding, having to do with Lavan, when he's talking to his wives, he doesn't say, what an amazing geneticist I am that I made spotted sheep out of unspotted sheep. He says, Hashem came to me in a dream and he told me, that these would be my wages. And so he's bringing it back to acknowledging that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who decides whether or not he's going to be blessed. And that, I think, is the ultimate combination that we're looking for, right? That we need to be a nation that does with the hands of Esau, right? Because there is no conceivable scenario in which we ever deserve a nes great enough that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes all the beepers of all the Hezbollah fighters blow up without our somehow doing something to help that to happen, right? He doesn't take Bnei Yisrael, pick them up from Mitzrayim and drop them down in Eretz Yisrael. There's a limit. He wants us to put in effort. He wants us to walk. He wants us to go to the sea, so to speak. And also here, it's like he wants us to attack our enemy, right? He doesn't just sweep the enemy off the board without our doing anything. Only once Bnei Yisrael walked to the sea does Moshe then get to say, Adonai nahem nahem u'atem taharishun. So God will wage war for you, or the Lord will wage war for you, and you can sit quiet. Like the sitting quiet happens after they walked out of Mitzrayim and didn't go by the easy way by the way of the Plishtim, because of the potential for war, right? That they're living in a real world with real choices to make, and they're acting in that world. And only once they go and do some things, then maybe, the nest can happen and you can have tremendous, marvelous success. So I think to synthesize these ideas and looking at present events, it's just very important both that we say, in the way that Yitzchak is eager to say, he wants his son to go out and do something and to give him a blessing for doing it. And so we got to give that blessing to the many mighty fighters of Medinat Yisrael, whether in espionage, whether in cyber, whether on the battlefield, without whom things wouldn't get done. And the things that need getting done, the attacking of our enemy, is a mitzvah, and it's an important thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to invest effort in, so that he can give backing to that effort, right? So we need to acknowledge the tremendous might and ingenuity of our brothers and sisters who made this possible, right? But with that being said, it has to be that this is being done with the yadayim, the hands of Esau, but with the kol, with the voice of Yaakov. And so it's also the case that it's extremely important, especially in this case, that we remember it is no less true that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to make this marvelous occurrence a success than in other instances, right? I think sometimes there's a tendency, when there's such a clear technical ingenuity behind what's accomplished, to forget Hashem Dafka in those situations, right? That, as I said before, if somehow there'd been an earthquake that buried a whole bunch of Hezbollah fighters in their tunnels where they were hiding, getting ready for some kind of invasion, maybe that could still happen, right? But if that happened, everyone would say, there is a mighty one true God in heaven who has shown his judgment, and there'd be a whole lot of people who would just line up, because it would be jaw-dropping, and we'd be so grateful, and we'd be looking where to deliver that gratitude to, because we wouldn't have done it. But when people do things, we feel like, okay, so let's be grateful to those people, and then we're done. But it's not enough. And it's especially important, even while, not taking the credit, the zechut, the merit away from the people who've done the mitzvah, because Hashem wants them to do it, and he wants people who accomplish his commands successfully to be praised. With all that being said, it's especially important in those cases to say, although we did this, it's not going to be okay if we say in our hearts, with my own, with otzim, my own kohi, whatever, my own strength, my own power, that's how I made a chayil hazeh, like this might or this produce or whatever, and forget Hashem. That is the slippery slope we have to avoid.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.